How your favorite TV shows ended, The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. I've been waiting for this one because this is a good one. Of course, before I get started, I do have to do a quick breakdown of all the characters and where they're at. Of course, we have Uncle Phil, rest in peace. We have Aunt Viv of Carlton, who's been accepted to Princeton and is moving out soon. Hillary has her own TV show called Hillary, and Hillary and her show are both moving to New York. There's Ashley, who's also moving to New York and will be living with Hillary as she goes to school. Nikki, the youngest, is actually going to kindergarten. And there's Will. Well, not much going on for him, as we'll see in this episode. We start off the episode with Uncle Phil coming home from work. He believes this to be an empty house because he calls for everybody and nobody answers. And it's also his birthday. And since he thinks he's alone, he pumps up the jams and breaks it down. That's when he slides into the living room and everybody pops up and surprises him with the birthday cake. Yeah, they scare the crap out of him. We find the Banks family in the living room as they all sing happy birthday and start to cut the cake. And Uncle Phil is so happy that his family is doing such exciting things. Well, except Will. Of course, Carlton teases him about it. That's when Jeffrey comes in with the champagne and they toast. After they toast, Jeffrey says he has an announcement as well. It seems that he's moving out to go live with his son, Frederick. So he's moving back to England. And everybody is devastated. But they wish him the best and they toast again. Everybody still keeps giving Will a hard time because he still hasn't graduated. And even little Nicky says that he can go to kindergarten with him. And we leave Will thinking things over. Later on, Hillary gives Jeffrey a going away present, which is just an autographed picture of her that talks. Now Carlton comes in talking about rewriting Uncle Phil's will now that he's 50 years old. After that, in comes Jazz, who's come to say hello, but he also bought a present for Uncle Phil. It's his grandma's false teeth. She don't need them anymore. And of course, he gets thrown out. Later on that day, everybody continues to prepare for their changes. We have Carlton talking to Jeffrey about he needs to do his dry cleaning before he leaves. We have Hillary talking to Ashley and arguing about how the apartment is going to look and how they're going to decorate it. We fast forward to Will and Carlton in the pool house. Will is kind of just hanging out. Carlton continues to give Will a hard time. You see, he says that he was working hard like the ant and Will was just playing around like the grasshopper. Will says that might be so, but at least he had a life and he went out with girls. One that maybe even Carlton liked. Carlton replies, that's pretty funny, but what's even funnier is to seeing who moves out first, Will or Nikki. That's when we find Will going to talk to Jeffrey, talking about his friend who's feeling left behind because everybody's doing such exciting things except for him. Jeffrey gives some advice that doesn't help him at all. We fast forward to everyone getting together for dinner, and they continue to give Will a hard time. Uncle Phil says they should cherish this moment, as this is one of the few times that this whole family will be together. Carlton replies that don't worry, that Will be here for a long time and he's not going anywhere. That's when Will says that he's moving out and he's already found an apartment. Everybody is stunned and can't believe it. Will walks out and Jeffrey just looks at him because he knows it's a lie. Nikki says the pool house is his. Now the next day, Jeffrey catches Will looking for apartments. And he knows that Will has painted himself into a corner telling people he has an apartment when he doesn't. But he's got Will's back and he's not going to say anything. Uncle Phil comes in and starts to tell Will that he's proud of him and he wants to tell him a story. But Will says he has things to do for his apartment and he walks away. Nikki starts to move things to the pool house because he's moving in. Now, where Will was actually going is to go apartment hunting, and the first one takes him to an apartment held by an old lady. That lady is crazy because she's arguing with somebody in that room and there's nobody there. We go back to the living room of the Banks family, and Jeffrey's on the phone and he's hoping that Uncle Phil will boost his plane ticket to first class. Uncle Phil says no way. Now, as everybody's gathered, Uncle Phil talks about how they're gonna have to get together for every major holiday and he's gonna call them every Sunday to catch up with it. At first, everybody starts to argue, saying that they have their own lives and they might not be available. Uncle Phil is not having it, as he says they're gonna get together whether they like it or not because they're family and they love each other. Now, Will continues his apartment hunting and he finds one that seems a little too good to be true, except the other tenant isn't moving out and Will is not okay with that, so he's out. Will comes in unsuccessfully finding an apartment and he talks to Jeffrey. Made a mistake, but he's gonna confess, telling everybody what's going on, and in comes Uncle Phil and Aunt Viv. Since everybody's moving out and this house is so big, they've decided to move back east to be closer to everybody else. They're selling the house, and everybody begins to freak out. So now everybody's moving out. Will was also going to give an announcement. He was going to confess that he didn't have an apartment, but at the end, he kind of just backed out. So at the moment, Will has no place to live and everybody's moving to the East Coast. And that's part 1 of this 2-part series, so make sure to follow for the next one. Where we last left off, the Banks family was all moving to the East Coast and they were selling the house. And Will lied to them and told them he had an apartment, when he really didn't. Now we start off this episode with Carlton and Will waking up in the pool house. And in their discussion, that's when Carlton starts to ask about Will's place. See, he's never seen it before, namely because it doesn't exist. And Will at first starts to hype it up, saying it's huge and it has a jacuzzi. And when Carlton asks to store some stuff in his place, he takes it all back. And ultimately, Will confesses to Carlton that he doesn't have an apartment and he never had one. Carlton then apologized for teasing him so much in the past couple of days. He also suggests that Will should move to the East Coast with the rest of the family. Will declines, saying that he came there to finish school and that's what he's going to do. And when Carlton suggests that he should get Uncle Phil involved, he says no. He doesn't want Uncle Phil cleaning up all his messes anymore. And he makes Carlton swear not to tell anybody. Later, Will comes home from apartment hunting and finds Jeffrey in the kitchen. He still can't find an apartment. And Jeffrey's there to show the house since it's an open house today, which Will volunteers to take his place in order to discourage people from buying it. And in order to help Will, Jeffrey agrees. First up, we have Arnold and Mr. Drummond. You might recognize them from Different Strokes. They love the house. They even say Willis would love it. That's when Will has to jump in and he tells them that they don't want to live here because it was built on an Indian burial ground. That's when we get a classic, "What you talking about, Will?" Sorry, that was so bad. But ultimately, what convinces them not to buy the house is they don't have a wet bar. With that, they're out. Next up, we have George and Wheezy, the Jeffersons. Now at first, Wheezy loves the place, but George says they can't afford it. And when Wheezy asks, "George, how can you say that?" That's when Florence chimes in and says, "He's cheap. That's how." That's when Will chimes in and tells George next door, it's practically a Playboy mansion, bikini girls everywhere. And on Memorial Day, it all comes off, if you know what I'm saying. George loves this, but Wheezy is backing out now. She doesn't want the house anymore. Now later on, we find the Banks family all in the living room, and that's when Uncle Phil gets a call from the realtor. Turns out there's a family interested in buying the house, the Jeffersons. The Banks family only has a week to move because something about on Memorial Day, it all comes off. That's tough on the family because they only have a couple of days to move, but their solution is they'll just move into the Plaza Hotel and stay there for a while. But that's really trouble for Will because he only has 7 days to find an apartment. Now we fast forward to 6 days later and Will still can't find an apartment. Turns out it's pretty tough when he's got no job, no credit, no references. Now the family is doing their last bit of packing in the living room when they suddenly start to bring up Will's apartment and how nobody's seen it yet. That's when Carlton jumps in and says that he's seen it and that it's great. It's amazing even, better than where they live in now. He's trying to help Will. That's when the rest of the family agrees that, hey, let's check it out right now. That's when Will has to come clean. He doesn't have an apartment and he never had one. Uncle Phil is pissed and he clears the room. Uncle Phil asks, "What's going on?" And at first Will is very proud, says it's his problem. Not anybody else. It doesn't involve anybody else but him. But Uncle Phil isn't buying it. He asks, "Why did you lie?" And he replies that with everybody's amazing new changes and new opportunities, he didn't want him to think that Will had wasted all his time out there, that he was the same stupid kid that he met all those years back. He didn't want him to think that he was a disappointment. Uncle Phil answers, "How can you think that? Take a look at yourself. You're moving out soon. You're graduating college in a year. You're becoming a man. A man I'm damn proud of." He says when he met Will all those years back, he saw a kid filled with all the potential in the world. And now he sees someone on the verge of reaching that potential. And with that, they go find an apartment. Now, we fast forward to back in the pool house with Will and Carlton, who are starting to pack up their things now that Will finally has an apartment. They briefly discuss how Carlton has a Biggie Small CD and Will has a copy of What's New Pussycat. But ultimately, they talk about how they've grown up together and they've shared so many experiences. And ultimately, they'll forever have each other's backs. And one last time, we get the Carlton dance. Even Will dances it. It gets pretty nuts. Now it's the final moments in the house and everybody's just kind of looking around and it's very emotional. And once again, Will talks to Uncle Phil. Will says that when he first came here, he was a relative. And over the years, he became family. He's never had a father or siblings. And he doesn't want to lose it. Uncle Phil says he won't lose them. Will is his son. End of story. They agree that Uncle Phil will call Will just like any of his other children. Now the car comes to take everyone to the airport, but Carlton is reminded he should go to the restroom before he leaves. That's when Uncle Phil talks to Jeffrey, telling him he upgraded his plane ticket to first class, and he officially relieves him of his duty. To which Jeffrey celebrates. He's just kidding. Will says goodbye to the family and gives them each a hug. Even have an emotional scene where Jeffrey says goodbye and he says, "Goodbye, Will." Uncle Phil gives Will the keys to the house for him to lock up once he's moved his stuff. He's on the verge of tears. Uncle Phil turns back and says, "Sundays." Will looks across the empty room and walks away, turning off the lights. Reminds everybody that Carlton is still in the restroom, so he comes running out. Will chuckles and walks away. And there you go. That's how the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air ended. Personally, I think this was an excellent ending. 10 out of 10, no notes. Even looking back at it now, it's pretty emotional. Let me know what you thought of this episode or what other shows I should do, and make sure to follow for more.